Good morning, everybody, and happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Rosie, and I'm from the YWCA Greenwich Domestic Abuse Services. So, you might be familiar with the YWCA. We have camps over the summer, we have a preschool, a gym, we have an after school program, but we also have this department of the YWCA where we help people with their relationships. And that's where I work. And my job is to come into every sixth grade, eighth grade, and 11th grade classrooms and have conversations with students about our relationships and what makes them healthy and unhealthy. And so for the next two class periods, we're going to be talking together about teen dating violence and what the warning signs are. And how to get help for yourself or for a friend. And the reason that we do that, it's so important to do that here in Greenwich, is because domestic violence is the second most investigated crime by the Greenwich Police Department. And young people, specifically from the ages of 16 to 24, are 3 times more likely to be involved in an abusive relationship than other age groups. So it's especially important. If we look at those statistics, we can see that actually 25% of young people will be involved in an abusive relationship. So that means that you're very likely going to know someone who's in one of these relationships. And so I want to help give you the tools so that you can help yourself, but you could also help a friend. So a couple of ground rules for our conversation together. Please take care of yourself. Put your head down, get a drink of water, do whatever you have to do to emotionally take care of yourself during this conversation. If at any point you feel that you want to discuss amongst yourselves a real life situation, something that's really been happening in your life, we just ask that you don't use anyone's name when you're referencing any real life situations. So you can say, I have a friend who, or I know somebody who, but we want to be careful to protect the privacy and the confidentiality of people who are here with us and not here with us. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about language. So, it's easy for us to stereotype gender-based violence and to often think in our minds that abusers should be referred to as he and victims should be referred to as she. When in reality, we know that anyone can be a victim of intimate partner violence and anyone can be a perpetrator of intimate partner violence. So it's very important that we use as many gender neutral pronouns as we can as we talk about this stuff, and kind of recognize that this is an issue that affects all people. It is not just an issue that is perpetrated by men. Women are also perpetrators of violence, and it's not just an issue that only affects women, right? It affects men, it affects LGBTQ people, it affects everyone. So now that we're kind of on the topic of stereotypes, I want you to ask yourself, what comes to your mind when you think of an abusive relationship? Typically, what comes to my mind is I have sort of an image in my mind of a man hitting or kicking or some otherwise physically hurting his girlfriend or his wife, right? And that's kind of the stereotype that's in our minds, but actually the reality of domestic abuse is that it's a lot more complex than just physical hitting, and there's many different ways that people can be abused. There can be relationships that are totally abusive that never reach the point of physical violence. So we're going to talk about the 6 different types of abuse quickly. And, of course, we think of physical abuse, right? When we think of domestic abuse, we think physical abuse, we think physical pain, injury, or oftentimes we'll also think about intimidation. So when we see physical intimidation, what that really looks like is someone threatening to punch the wall behind me, but not punch me. Or someone standing in the doorway so that I can't leave when we're having an argument. Or someone destroying my property. So all of those things are instilling the fear of physical injury in me, right? I'm still afraid that I'll be hurt, even though I've never actually been touched, right? And so when we think about physical abuse, we have to include physical intimidation in our definition of that. Then we have sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is any forced, undesired, or coerced sexual behavior. And sexual abuse happens, in the context of romantic relationships all the time. It oftentimes happens under the guise of manipulation, right? So, for example, let's say that two people are in a committed relationship, and one person says, if you really loved me, you would have sex with me. And then that their partner gave their consent for sexual activity. Was that really consensual? Well, no, it wasn't, right? Because that consent was coerced out of someone. It was manipulated from someone. And in this case, it was kind of guilted out of them. So it's important to remember that even in relationships that are, long standing, maybe two people have been together for a long time and they've had a consensual sexual relationship with one another in the past, they still always need to get consent from each other every time they engage in any kind of sexual activity. Then we have verbal abuse, and verbal abuse is easy, I think, to pass over when we think about all these different types of abuse. It's easy for me to kind of think to myself, well, verbal abuse probably isn't as bad as some of these other forms of abuse, but in reality, that's not true. So we hear from victims at the YWCA that after the bruises have healed, maybe they're out of their relationship, they're healthy, they've moved on with their lives, the abuser's voice still kind of lives in their mind. And so they hear the abuser using these hateful, mean, degrading, threatening words towards them in their minds for years and years and years after the abuser is actually out of the picture. So, when we think about verbal abuse, we think about really kind of any hurtful, mean, put downs, threats. And then, of course, we have emotional abuse. And emotional abuse is very difficult to spot when it's happening. So emotional abuse causes psychological or emotional trauma. And really the two key words when we think about emotional abuse are manipulation and isolation. So if someone has been manipulated into becoming very, very, very isolated from their friends, their family, the things that they used to like to do, if you notice that maybe your friend is behaving differently than they used to behave, making different choices, dressing differently, it may be a good sign to just kind of check in with them and see what's going on. As I mentioned, emotional abuse happens through manipulation. And so to give an example of an emotionally abusive relationship, I'll tell you this. We worked with a young woman whose partner told her that she looked so beautiful without makeup on. And really, why would she want to look trashy with makeup on anyway? I mean, she looked so gorgeous without makeup on. Why would she even want to wear it? So this young woman stopped wearing makeup because her partner told her that she looked beautiful. But makeup was kind of her thing. And so the less opportunity she was wearing makeup, it affected her self-esteem. She didn't feel very comfortable when she was out with friends or at school because she wasn't dressing the way that she really liked to dress. And even though her partner didn't say to her, hey, if you want to keep dating me, you have to stop wearing makeup, they didn't say that at all. They said, you look so beautiful without makeup on. So it sounded like a compliment. But really what the person in this relationship, the abuser in this relationship, was attempting to do was kind of to see how much about her could they control. Right? And really the idea behind emotional abuse is that that the lower self-esteem a person has, the easier they're to control. So, if I am not dressing the way that I used to dress, if I'm not hanging out with the people that I used to hang out with, and I'm not doing the things that I really enjoy doing, then my self-esteem is going to be much lower. And a person with low self-esteem is much easier to control. So again, emotional abuse, very difficult to spot in the moment, but something that will show up clearly over time. Then we have financial abuse, and financial abuse is really when an abuser is controlling another person's access to economic resources. And it's much easier to spot in adults because I think adults deal in money a lot more in our relationships than teenagers do. But I'll give you an example of financial abuse for teens. There was a young woman that we worked with at Greenwich High School who knew that her relationship was abusive and she decided that she wanted to get out of it. And so she goes to break up with her boyfriend and he says, okay, but he pulls out this little notebook And he says, I've been keeping a list of every dollar that I ever spent on you in this relationship. Every pizza slice, every movie ticket, the necklace that I got you for your birthday. And we can break up, but before we do, you owe me this much money. Now, certainly she didn't actually owe him any money. And she was able to get out of the relationship without having to pay back any imaginary debt, right? But what this person was attempting to do was to hold this dollar amount over her head as though, the gifts that she had been given in the relationship were now owed back to him because she was breaking off the relationship, right? And so, of course, that's an example of someone using guilt around money. But, I do feel that it's important to say that, of course, if somebody gave you a gift, you would have no reason to believe that you owed them money back, right? So, in a situation like the one we just spoke about, this was a situation where he was attempting to use guilt in order to keep her in this relationship. And then finally, we have digital abuse. Digital abuse is when an abusive partner is controlling or monitoring someone using technology. And technology is these days is just another tool that people are using in order to control or to kind of watch over their partners, right? So constant texting and calling is a great example of digital abuse. The idea that if I don't respond to my partner right away, then my partner will start a fight with me, right? There was a girl at GHS whose her teachers noticed that she was falling asleep in class. And so they tried to figure out what was going on, and they determined that her boyfriend would call her every hour on the hour throughout the night. And if she didn't answer the phone, he would start a fight with her and accuse her of cheating on him. And so she didn't want to not answer the phone at night, so she wasn't really sleeping. Another example of digital abuse involves GPS tracking. So there was a young man at GHS, and his girlfriend was constantly calling him and texting him, and he was really just needed a break from it. So he put his phone away, and he was playing basketball with his friends. And his girlfriend found where he was using Snap Maps and showed up to his basketball game and made a huge scene and really humiliated him. And that's when he decided to come work with us because he really felt like that had kind of crossed a line for him. So, digital abuse is again, really technology is just a tool that abusers are using to really expand their reach of power and control. So I want to be really careful about the definition of abuse because we've talked about a lot of things thus far, and I want to be really clear that if you get into a fight with your partner and you call them a name, that doesn't automatically mean that you are abusive, right? Or if you double text or call your partner because you're really excited to be with them, that doesn't automatically make you abusive. So I want to be really careful about the definition. An abusive relationship is defined as a pattern of abusive behaviors that one person is using to get and then keep power and control over the other dating partner. So really, it's always one person who's using these tactics to get the power and then keep the power. And as soon as the other partner tries to kind of get some equality, gets their bearings, feels a little bit more equal in the relationship, the abuser is going to ramp it up. And the idea is that the abuser always wants to have power over the victim, right? It's never meant to be equal. It's never meant to be a back and forth. So of course, there's only two types of abuse that if they happen only one time, they're automatically abusive and automatically illegal. And those, of course, would be sexual abuse and physical abuse. So you've gotten a lot of really, really great information so far. And I know that this is just a video today. So I want to give you guys an opportunity to talk, to ask questions amongst yourselves. And we will pick back up on Friday with the second half of our presentation. So thanks everybody so much for listening, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.